All right, gang, at this point, you're ready to go ahead and begin the Partworks portion of our end table project. So in the previous video, you would have had an opportunity to see how we went from an AutoCAD drawing, or from an idea in our head, I should say, to a drawing in AutoCAD. We are creating both the long apron and the short aprons in AutoCAD, and we'll be doing those in two separate files. So as I have open right now, Pratt underlined there, long apron drawing. And this again was saved as a 2007 DXF file. So at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to bring this into Partworks to create this item right here in front of me. So let me show you how we're going to go through the steps of using this program called Partworks to generate the toolpath needed for the CNC machine to actually read code and cut out the part that we're going to make. So to start out, we're going to open up the program Partworks. And this will take a little bit of time on your computer the first time you log in, but there is a sticker on the bottom right of your keypad on the laptop that I provide in class with the username, which is Manheim Central High School 3, as long as a license code, which is a long list of numbers. You do not need to leave a space in between those numbers. So to begin here, we're going to go ahead and hit create a new file. And in order to set up our job setup here, this is basically our work piece that's going to be on the CNC. So the same size board that's going on the CNC is what we're setting up here in this program. We're going to refer back to our project plans here for this project. And if you notice, I have finished dimensions and we have rough dimensions. The finished dimensions are the final size of every piece that's going to be cut out, whether it's with the CNC or maybe with just traditional machinery. But you'll notice that we use finished dimensions to draw our AutoCAD design, but we're going to use the rough dimensions to lay out our Partworks job setup. So you'll see it says do not plane before using CNC router, and you'll notice that there's 2 underneath the quantity for long aprons and 1 board for short aprons, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a separate video for the short aprons. So what do we need to do here for the long apron? Well, we need to know that 7/8 is the thickness, 15 inches is the length, and 5 inches is the width. So these 3 numbers are going to be important for this job setup in Partworks. So let's go back to our Partworks document here. And so we have the width, which is really the length of our board in Partworks, so that's 15 inches. We have our height at 5, that's the overall width of the board that's going to be put on the CNC, and thickness needs to be changed so it's 7/8. In decimal form, this would be 0.875. So these 3 numbers are what you should have on your Partworks screen. The other thing that's important to look at is our material and where the Z0ing is going to take place. Basically, where do we want the bit to be starting at? The top of our board or the bottom of our board when we look at the thickness of the material. And we always want to start at the top of the board. So that's going to be staying where it is by default. And then use origin offset should not be check marked. So you notice how that box is not check marked right now. And we're going to go ahead and hit OK. At this point, we can go ahead and bring in that AutoCAD drawing that we saved the other in the previous video. And so to do this, we're going to go under File Operations at the top in our Drawing tab. So this whole window here is called our Drawing tab. And the 4th icon in from the left side is called Import Vectors from a File. A vector simply means it's a line. So we're cutting out something using lines. So we're going to be using that folder icon to find our document within our Mat1 folder. And remember, we saved it as our last name, Long Apron Drawing. So I can go ahead and open that up. You'll notice that it shows up and it's not necessarily centered in the board that we have here. And so we're going to go ahead and move that. In order to move it, you need to make sure that everything is highlighted, which it currently is when it's brought in to the program. And we're going to go under Align Objects down at the bottom left screen of our screen here and click on the icon Center in Material. When I do that, it moves my drawing to the middle of the piece. Now the reason we made this board longer than the actual size of our piece of material that we're going to be cutting out is because we're going to be placing screws at each corner of the board. And then when we cut this out, we want to make sure that the screws and the bit that are going to be cutting out this piece do not come in contact with each other, because obviously that was a concern for safety, and it's dangerous for both the machine and could ruin your project. So we want to make sure we have a little extra space here. So we do. So now we can go ahead and set up for our toolpaths. You don't have to do anything else under the drawing tab as far as bringing files in or creating vectors, because you did all that, but we do need to edit this vector. Because right now if I deselect and I try selecting it, you'll notice that not every line connects together. So what we're going to do is we're going to start on the right side or the top right corner of our drawing here. You'll notice that two lines are already connected, as you can see they're highlighted, and we're going to hold down the shift button on our keypad and select another line adjacent to that, or wanting to be connected to that. Now you can't go through and connect all of them at the same time because it doesn't work. You can only do two lines at a time. So I'll hold down shift and select two line segments, and under edit vectors you're going to click on the icon that says join vectors with a smooth curve. When I do this, you might notice that the lines that are highlighted move slightly. You may not see it too. But what happens is it now knows that this point, where these two line segments met, is now connected. Again, if I try to do all the lines at the same time, let's say I just stop there and I try to join it, it's not going to work. It doesn't know what point of these line segments should be connected to the other point. So you have to tell the computer what to connect together, which is why we can only do one line segment to another at a time. So now I can go in here, continue to hold down shift as I select each line, click the icon, and continue all the way around my entire piece. Now I'm showing this because a lot of students tend to mess up this part when they're trying to join all their lines together and they're like, it's not working. Well, there's a reason it's not working. It's because you're joining all of them at the same time. So now if I deselect everything and I go to select it, you can see how it's all highlighted together. So hopefully this makes sense at this point. And now we're done with editing our vector. This is the last step under the drawing tab. So what we're going to do is unpin this from our screen just to make sure that our job here that we're working on, this, I like to call it the canvas, is a little bit larger to see. And we're going to be looking at what's called the toolpath tab over on the right side of our screen. So you'll see as you hover over it, it opens up. And let's go ahead and just pin that to our screen so it doesn't disappear on us. We're going to be using what's called a profile toolpath to create this file. To create that profile toolpath, we're going to go under Toolpath Operations, and we're going to click on the item that says Create Profile Toolpath. We also want to make sure that our drawing is selected as well. So I'll click that. I have my highlighted drawing. I'm going to be putting in a few measurements here, or a few numbers, and it should be the same on your computer as well. So if it doesn't line up, make sure that you're following the video to add those numbers in. First off, our start depth should be 0. That means that it's starting at the top of the board, which is correct. Our cut depth is going to be the final thickness of our material, and we know that our final thickness of our long apron should be 3/4 of an inch. So we're going to go back here and make sure that cut depth should say 3/4, or in decimal form that would be 0.75. Next, we're going to choose our tool. Our tool that we're going to be using is called an end mill 0.25 or a 1/4 inch, and we'll hit select to get to that tool if it's not already there. And we're going to go down to inch tools, and under inch tools you'll see a variety of bits that we have available to us. But we're going to be using the one called end mill 0.25. Now there's two things that you need to make sure that are correct in this tool info. First is the diameter. It should say 0.25. By default, it usually is set up correctly. However, if a student was in the program before you, then that could be adjusted. So just make sure that diameter is 0.25. The other thing that's important for this project is going to be the pass depth. We want to make sure that the pass depth is no greater than 0.125. So if it is 0.125, that's great. If it's bigger than that, I've asked that you go ahead and change that to 0.125. So just change that number over, hit apply, and then you're going to click OK. Once you've done that, you now have your tool selected. The last thing we need to do before we can calculate our tool path, which is creating our code, is we're going to make sure the machine vector is on the outside, which means that the tool is going to follow the perimeter but be on the outside of the perimeter of our long apron drawing. If we choose inside, it's going to draw it on the inside, which means that the overall size of the piece is going to be too small. The same thing would happen if we choose on. What that means is the bit is going to travel along this line of our drawing, and the bit would cause the material to be too short again. So we're going to make sure to choose outside machine vector, and then we're going to scroll to the bottom and hit calculate. Once I do that, I'm going to see a 3D view, where you should be brought to a 3D view. And when you do that, you'll see these blue lines. These blue lines represent that the tool is going to be moving in probably a clockwise direction to cut out your piece. And you'll see that there's multiple blue lines. That means it's going to take multiple passes to cut down to the final thickness. The red line indicates where the bit is going to start, which would be this corner over here. It's going to move over to the actual drawing and then start to cut it out. We can also see, if we go back to the drawing tab of our screen, we can see that machine toolpath is going to start at the left corner here. It's going to go up and follow this arrow path that it's created, and notice it's on the outside, and come back. And it'll continue to do that until it cuts all the way through. We can also simulate in the 3D view what this would look like. So to do that, the first thing I would suggest is you have global fill color selected, and then you can go ahead and hit preview toolpath. What happens when you hit preview toolpath is it simulates what that would look like. And you can move this around with your cursor. You can also change the view of this depending on what we were cutting out. So typically I would say isometric or the Z are the only two that you need to view it in. And so this is what the end result would look like from the CNC. Now we'll talk about what we're going to do with the remaining of the material after it's cut out on the CNC to actually get this part out of the board. But for now, this is where you should be with this drawing and with this project. If you have any questions, feel free to watch the video again. You can also check your notes that you have for Partworks and also check in with a classmate as well if you need to. And I'll be around to answer any questions, as well as you can also ask an intern that might be available in the class. I hope that this video helps you as you continue to make progress towards the creation of your end table.